the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Long ago in the days of the patriarchs, when the earth was still young and nations were being formed, there were two cities on the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley, Sodom and Gomorrah *. These cities, blessed with abundant resources, lush fields, and beautiful landscapes, appeared to be places of prosperity and comfort. They were part of a confederation of 5 cities, sometimes referred to as the cities of the plain. To the human eye, they were thriving civilizations, rich in trade and full of life. But what lay beneath the surface was a different story, one of pride, corruption, and wickedness. Lot, the nephew of Abraham, had chosen to settle near Sodom when he and Abraham had grown too wealthy to live close together. Their herdsmen had begun to quarrel over grazing land, and Abraham, being the older and more generous, offered Lot the first choice of where to live. Lot, seeing the well-watered land of the plain, like the garden of the Lord, chose the valley, moving his tents closer and closer to Sodom until eventually he lived within its gates. But even at that time, the Bible notes, the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Time passed. Abraham remained in Canaan, continuing to walk with God, while Lot and his family lived in Sodom, raising daughters and making a home among a people whose ways were darkened by sin. Sodom and Gomorrah became known for their great immorality. Their sins were not just against themselves or their neighbors, but against the very laws of God. The cries of injustice, cruelty, and wickedness rose to the heavens. One day the Lord appeared to Abraham in the heat of the day, near the great trees of Mamre. As Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent, he looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. Knowing at once that these were no ordinary men, he ran to greet them, bowed low to the ground, and offered them rest, water, and food. The Lord, in the form of one of these visitors, spoke to Abraham and confirmed the promise that Sarah, though old and barren, would give birth to a son. As the meal concluded and the visitors rose to leave, the Lord paused and said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" The Lord then revealed to Abraham that the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah was so great, and their sin so grievous that he was going down to see whether the reports were as terrible as they sounded. And if not, he would know. The 2 angels turned and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. There on that plain, Abraham began to plead with God, not for the wicked, but for the righteous who might be among them. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" Abraham asked. "What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for their sake?" And the Lord replied, "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Encouraged, Abraham continued, asking for 45, then 40, 30, 20, and finally 10. Each time, God responded with mercy. If 10 righteous people could be found, he would spare the entire city. Then the Lord left, and Abraham returned home. That evening, the 2 angels came to Sodom. Lot was sitting at the city gate and immediately recognized them as special. Rising to greet them, he bowed and urged them to stay at his house. At first, the angels declined, saying they would spend the night in the square. But Lot insisted, and they agreed. He prepared a feast for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate together in his home. Before they had gone to bed, however, the men of the city, both young and old, surrounded Lot's house. They shouted to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so we can know them." The word used here, know, carries a dark meaning. It refers to a demand for sexual relations, an act of violent lust, and complete moral depravity. Lot stepped outside, closing the door behind him, and pleaded with the mob not to do such a wicked thing. In a desperate and heartbreaking move, he even offered his 2 virgin daughters to the crowd instead, saying, "Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." But the men of Sodom would not be reasoned with. They shouted at Lot, "This fellow came here as an outsider, and now he wants to judge us. We'll treat you worse than them." They lunged forward to break down the door. At that moment, the 2 angels pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men outside with blindness so that they groped for the door but could not find it. The angels said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." Lot rushed to warn his sons-in-law who were pledged to marry his daughters. He told them, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But they thought he was joking. At dawn, the angels urged Lot, "Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." Still, Lot hesitated. So the angels grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As they brought them out, one of the angels said, Flee for your lives, don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away. But Lot pleaded, No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness, but I cannot flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to. It is small, let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared. The angel granted his request and said, Very well, I will not destroy the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That town was called Zor. By the time Lot reached Zor, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur, fire, and brimstone from the heavens upon Sodom and Gomorrah. He overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife, as they fled, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. God remembered Abraham and saved Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. Lot was afraid to stay in Zor, so he and his daughters went up into the mountains and lived in a cave. Thinking that no men were left alive and that the human race might perish, Lot's daughters devised a sinful plan. On 2 successive nights they got their father drunk with wine, and each slept with him without his knowledge. The older daughter gave birth to a son and named him Moab. He became the father of the Moabites. The younger daughter also had a son named Ben-Ammi. He became the father of the Ammonites. Thus ended the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah, 2 cities that stood as warnings to all generations. They had every opportunity, prosperity, land, and time, to turn from their wickedness, but they chose arrogance over humility, cruelty over kindness, and lust over purity. In the end, their sins brought about their destruction, but God's mercy saved the few who still feared him. Their story echoes through the scriptures, used by prophets, apostles, and even by Jesus himself as a warning. And to this day, the names of Sodom and Gomorrah remain symbols of divine judgment and the seriousness of sin, but also of God's faithfulness in delivering the righteous. Amen.